Hello. For today's course, that is on sustainable management of biodiversity, we would discuss about the centers of origin of crops. We all know that different animals, plants and crops have been originated at different parts of the world, and accordingly their characteristics are determined. These crops have been the source of food for generations, and they are simply giving their best production ability by interacting with the climatic condition and also partially about the managemental practices which they receive. Therefore, there is a lot of significance in understanding the centers of origin of crops. If you just recall that different crop varieties are released by different institutions after doing the breeding programs, is only based on the selection among the diversity, and that diversity exists at different places in the world, and that those places are called the center of origin. In the present lecture, we would like to discuss certain objectives, and the objectives are like we shall discuss about the crop diversity, and we would like to understand the center of origin of different crops. The another point is that we would like to see that how this diversity helps in the understanding the significance of gene diversity. The gene means the characteristics which a particular plant shows under the given circumstances. And in the last, we shall discuss about the possibility of emergence of new genotypes, because this is a fundamental requirement in the nature that every crop after interaction with the nature and its peers should give rise to different kinds of genotypes, which is more adaptive, more productive and more easy in its cultivation. So, center of origin of the crops is very much important aspect as far as the sustainable management of agrobiodiversity is concerned. And the region where a crop was originated is termed as the center of origin, means an area in the world map where a particular crop shows maximum diversity is called as the center of origin. And also there are other centers, other places which are also called center of origin, where the crop shows same kind of existence. First time one Russian plant explorer N.I. Babilov, he noted that diversity of domesticated crops was not uniformly distributed around the world. Reason is that there are certain genes which are adaptive to a certain climatic conditions, edaphic conditions, and opposite to that there are certain genotypes which are not at all performing under such conditions. So, that is why this kind of diversity exists at different places in the world. This is the photograph of Babilov, the person who was responsible to find out the rather observe the diversity in the crops at different places in the world, and he first time found out that the maximum diversity is the place where crop originates. If you see, he has collected some genotypes of maize and he has kept this in his lab, in his office, and it is available. If you want to see, you can find out through the link given below to this photograph, and there you may also see several other examples in the same line. Now, Babilov noted that centers of origin of cultivated plants occurred mostly in mountainous region. If you see the geopolitical map of the world, you will see that the area between the Tropic of Capricorn, south of the equator, and about 45° north of the equator in the world has been the area where maximum crops have got their origin place. And it could be because of two reasons. One is that this management conditions are prevalent. Second, the edaphic conditions, the soil properties were supportive of such crops to grow. Babilov also considered that as a rule the primary focus of crop origin were in mountainous region characterized by the presence of dominant alleles. It means that the crops which were existing in a particular area has also similar crops, but they may not be so dominantly growing. They are available, but they may not be growing, and those are called the dominant alleles. Here, Mr. Babilo has identified 8 centers of origins. The first he found out is the Chinese center, where he recognized 138 distinct species of plants, which probably the earlier and most important were the cereals, buckwheat and legumes. These 3 crops were found having the center of origin in the Chinese area, and he has marked out that area in his detailed presentation. The second, he coined the Indian center, including the entire subcontinent, and it was based originally on rice, millet and legume, with the total crop species which he observed was 117 species. Another subsection of this particular center is the Indo-Malayan region, including Indonesia, Philippines, etc. Mostly root crops preponderant in this area, means mostly root crops were the prevalent crops, with some fruit crops, sugarcane, spices, and some 55 species have been listed under this particular center of origin. The third important center of origin as per the Babilov's nomenclature is the Inner Asiatic Center. Tajikistan, Uzbekistan are the part of this center, and here the crops which were prominently originated were wheat, rye and many herbaceous legume, as well as seed sown root crops and fruit, and some 42 species were listed under this particular center of origin. The fourth important center of origin is the Asia Minor, which includes the Transcaucasia, Iran, Turkmenistan, and here some other species of wheat. Wheat has more than 30 different genotypes. So some are originated in the Asiatic region, some were in Indian region. Rye, oat, seed, forage, legume, fruit, etc. means collectively 83 species were found originating under this particular center of origin. The fifth was the Mediterranean center, and this was of more limited importance than the others to the east, but including wheat, barley, forage plants, vegetables, fruits, especially also the spices and ethereal oil plants, were some 84 species of plant which have originated under this particular center of origin. The sixth was the Abyssinian, now it is the Ethiopia, the new country, the new nomenclature, and this center has lesser important crops, like mostly the crops like barley, local grain, spices. Some 38 species of the crops were found their origin at this place. The seventh most important point is that center of origin is the South Mexican and Central American center, which is very much important for the crop like maize, phaseolus and other cucurbitaceae species with spices, fruit and fiber plants. Some 49 plant species were originated under this particular center of origin. The eighth center pertains to South America Andes region, particularly covering the region of Bolivia, Peru, Ecuador, and they are important for potatoes. As we know that the potato is the most important vegetable crops in the world, and it is being consumed almost more than 65% of the countries in the world. And other root crops were like grain crops of Andes, vegetables, spices and fruits, as well as drug like cocaine, quinine, tobacco. These were also originated under this particular center of origin, and around 45 crop species were found originated under this center, that is South America Andes region. Part of it is the Chilean center, and it has only 4 species like Solarium tubersum, and mainly it has some similar dominant alleles which have been found other places. They were also available under this center. So this is of least important center, but has given a very good crop similar to the potato, and which is being used for making crosses of different potato varieties. Now the another subsection of the same South America Andes region is the Brazilian Paraguayan center. It is again outside the main center with only 13 species like cassava, peanut, rubber. These are pineapple. These are the few important crops which have originated under this center. Now it is important to see that how Babylov has identified the center of origin, what techniques he has used to demarcate an area as a center of origin of crops. A strict differentiation of plant studied into linear species and intraspecific groups on the basis of morphology, agrobotany, phytopathology, cytology, recently by molecular methods, means he has utilized all the existing practices of studying the plant morphology, means outside appearance of the plant, agrobotany, their characteristics in terms of growth and development, phytopathology, how those particular plants were affected by different pests and diseases, and cytology to some extent with the available technology, means he has further gone to the level of internal organ studying. The second technique he used, delimitation of the distribution area of these plants, and if possible also the distribution area in remote past when communication and seed exchange were more difficult than at present. A detailed determination of the composition of the varieties and races of each species and a general system of the genetic variability within the different crops were also observed by him while denoting a particular center of origin. He also looked at the establishment of the distribution of genetic variability of the forms of given species as far as regions and areas are concerned, and the establishment of the geographical centers where these varieties are now accumulated. Regions of maximum diversity, usually also including a number of endemic types and characteristics, can also be center of type formation. Means the areas where maximum distribution exists, that center also listed as the center of origins. For a more exact definition of the center of origin and type formation, it is necessary to establish the geographical centers of concentration of species that are botanically closely related as well. Finally, the establishment of the areas of diversity of wild subspecies and species that are closely related to the cultivated species in question should be used for amendment and addition to the area defined as area of origin when the differential method of studying races is applied to them. Now, if you see the geographical area which were demarcated as just like a center of origin of different cultivable flora during 1966 and 69, there were 5 centers, basically ancient Mediterranean centers, particularly sub areas of it is Southwest Asia, again subsection of it is Anterior Asia, which consists of the Asia Minor, Near East, West Iran, and the another subsection of it is Middle Asia, that consisted Turkmenistan, Afghanistan, East Iran, Northwest India, Pakistan, and also other sub area was Mediterranean area. So why these particular pockets are important is that if they are known what kind of crop existed there, simply anyone can go there and identify the interesting gene and can also earmark it for the purpose of breeding for different species and different varieties. The another basic area of origin was East Asia, which consisted basically the Northeast Asia, Japan and Manchuria, Southeast and Central China. The another basic area of origin was South Asia, which consisted South China, India, Sri Lanka and Malaysian region. The another was Africa, which consisted entirely the African countries. All the African subcontinent countries are part of it. And there were another terminology used for basic area of origin is the New World, that consisted basically Central America and South America. Now we all know that the center of origin of crop is very much important as far as the diversity of the plant is concerned. Therefore, we would like to discuss about the gene flow of plant genetic resources. Most crops were first domesticated during the Neolithic period. The reason was that the human being started agriculture during that period only. Therefore, most of the crops were domesticated and they were being cultivated, they were put under cultivation. The early stage in the expansion of agriculture is regarded as the first phase in the distribution of agriculture genetic diversity. As and when the human being started collecting the important genotypes of the crop species, they gave rise to the diversity in the crops. Later, the trade routes between the Arabian Peninsula, East Africa, Europe and Asia played a significant role in the movement of crop genetic diversity and exchange of plant genetic resources between different regions. We are aware about different routes like spices route, silk route, which exist over a long period of time in our past history, where we know that the crop produce of different economical importance were being transported to different parts of the world through these routes. So that also added the transportation of the diversity from one place to another place, and also helped the accumulation of that particular diversity to a particular place where it was required at maximum amount. Regions of diversity of major crops, particularly maritime exploration, particularly the opening of communication between the old and new world after 1492 initiated the second phase in the development of agriculture genetic diversity. If you see the period during 1400 AD, mostly the different explorations have taken place around the world and people were found different places, and accordingly they took along with them many crop species for their consumption, and ultimately that also dislocated from one place to another place along with the explorers. The region of diversity of major crop is shown in this particular slide. You see that there are so many places, and the places are listed with the crop which exist in that area, and mostly confining the African continent and Asian continent and also part of South American continent. These are the important areas where maximum number of crops were originated. Now, in the line of center of origin of crops, there are also secondary centers which are not called the center of origin, but they are important as far as the harnessing diversity in the crop is concerned. What does secondary centers of diversity mean? The exchange of genetic resources through trade route and maritime explorations have resulted in the development of secondary centers of diversity for few crop species. For example, a high level of diversity in varieties of common bean, maize and cassava evolved naturally and has been developed by the farmers in African countries after these species were brought from Latin America. Similarly, finger millet developed important characteristics in South Asia after it was introduced from East Africa several thousand years ago. Similar is the case in our country also. Several new plant species are now posing threat to the different commercial crops, and those weeds are not originated in the subcontinent from which India belongs. Rather, they have been transported along with the seeds of crop which have been transported from different countries. South Asia is now an important source of finger millet diversity. Barley, which was originated in Near East, developed important disease resistant quality in Ethiopia, where it was introduced about 5000 years ago. So now, as and when the particular genotype develops resistant against the disease pest and also develops the compatibility with the existing climatic condition of a particular place, that also grows well and shows a lot of diversity. So that particular center can be called as secondary place of diversity. Now, there are certain independent use of plant genetic diversity. At present, the agriculture of most countries relies to a large extent on genetic resources from other parts of the world. As I have been repetitively telling in my presentation, that this diversity is very much important as far as the production of new crop varieties are concerned. For example, in Brazil, close to half the population's energy requirement from plant sources met by three principal crops: rice, wheat and maize, and all of which originated elsewhere in the world. So maybe they are not properly utilized at their place of origin, but they are being utilized at their place of secondary center for origin. 87% of the requirement for plant genetic resources in sub-Saharan Africa is obtained from other parts of the world. Most of the crops which have been transported from other parts to African countries, the people are relying on it, people are thriving on it. Now, more than 2/3 of the developing countries procure over half of their crop production from crops domesticated in other regions. So, this is very much important to understand that the crop which shows maximum diversity has capability to adapt under diverse conditions as well, and therefore it can exist at its center of origin, it can exist at its secondary center of origin, as well as it can be cultivated or domesticated at third place where the people might like its food, and that crop can grow well also. Now, what are the significance of the diversity in plant? The diversity gives us a scope of selecting the potent genes. Now, this selection process has been one of the greatest tools for the plant breeders, through which they were able to identify certain potent genotypes among the diversity, which can be taken away, which can be identified, and it was a tool before this biotechnology flourished, the only tool I would say, except the crossing. The selection was the most important tool where such efforts were made to identify the potent genotypes. Now, this diversity in the plant also helps crossing for noble plant type. Like said, there are certain plant species which exist a particular character, and that character can be transferred to another plant type, plant which is of much commercial importance, and we can use this diversity for gene flow or gene transfer utilizing the crossing method of the plant breeding. We can also undertake field trials in the areas of crop diversity. This will help us understanding the nature of the plant under diverse conditions, and this will also tell the adaptability features of the particular plant, and then accordingly we can determine that a plant which can exist or which can grow well under diverse condition is most important plant species, and accordingly that can be propagated across the places. This is all about today's presentation about the center of origin of the crops. Thank you.